Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Ki te piha koe. Hope you're well. Sorry about that. That was a bit of a strange introduction for you guys. I had the music freeze on me. Give us a wave, give us a shout out, people in the chat. Make sure you can hear us. The introduction music just froze on me. And then all of a sudden I was on the screen. Hello team, kia ora. Good to be with you. Now, before you all ask, yes, Chewy is joining us. He is going to be here. I just got a text message from him. As is always the case, you go away for a little while, you come back, your computer's done a whole bunch of updates, and all of a sudden things aren't quite working like they should be. So any moment, I'm sure you will see the Chewmeister General jump onto our screens and come say g'day to us all. We have Robert Patman, Professor Robert Patman, waiting for us in the wings. But before we go and grab the professor, let's just say a huge thanks to our patrons. So good to have you guys on board. So thankful that you are with us, patrons, all the lovely patrons that have signed up so far. There's a couple of names that still need to go onto our billboard, but there's a good collection of you there so far, from our executive producers all the way down to our coffee runners. We value you all, we thank you all, and you all help us to continue to do this. Every little bit helps. If you're interested in being a part of what we do and helping us to bring you these sorts of stories like we're going to be talking about tonight, then head to patreon.com/big hairy news. And if you are a patron, then what you will have seen pop up today is the story with Professor Mohan Dutta on David Seymour's support of Indian far-right politics. Well, I guess to be fair, maybe not his overt support, but using language that some far-right political movements in India are now amplifying because he spoke the words they wanted to hear it. I personally think, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, he was a bit of a useful idiot. Didn't quite know what it was going to mean, but there is a full 25-minute conversation there with Professor Dutta on Patreon, and tonight we'll be playing some of the highlights from that, about 12 to 15 minutes of it, and you'll get to see a bit of what we talked about. But as I said, if you're a patron, that's there waiting for you now. You can see the whole thing, and if you'd like to be involved in that kind of availability of content, then all you need to do is become a patron. And to become a patron, you head to patreon.com/big hairy news. A lot of people have already seen it. Simon says it was a very good interview. I listened earlier today. Thank you, Simon. I appreciate you being a patron. Right, let us rip into this. We have Professor Robert Patman coming on and joining in with us. Let's just bring him in and say, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, Pat.
Merry seasons to you and whatever we're
Thank you.
This time of year. We have brought you on board to have a bit of a chat about New Hampshire. What's happened with the American election, the GOP primaries today, but we might also throw a few Houthi and 6 New Zealanders going to join in the fight questions at you as well as we go through. But this is what we advertised. This is what we brought you here for. Sure. New Hampshire presidential primary election results are in. Donald Trump wins about 55% to about 44%. Nikki Haley was said to be a real good shot for this. But I guess an 11 to 12% win is still a pretty handy win for Donald Trump. And a lot of people are saying that this might be the end of it for anybody else. So firstly, what do you think of the result? Trump winning New Hampshire?
I don't think it's quite as good as many people are depicting. I was struck by that many commentators have said, well, Trump's got it completely sewn up now. And of course, as you quite rightly point out, Pat, it is quite a handsome victory, and it's his second on the trot. But, our viewers might recall that Joe Biden, when he was the Democratic in contention for the Democratic nomination in 2020, he lost the first 2 primaries. He didn't only get beaten, he got slaughtered.
Yeah.
He got to the third at South Carolina and won it, thanks to a high turnout from African Americans. And that turned his campaign round. Now, the reason I mention this, coming back to the Trump-Haley contest, I think, Nikki Haley didn't do as well as she would have liked, but she put a pretty respectable showing.
Yeah.
She reduced Trump's lead over the nearest rival in this contest. In the Iowa caucus contest, Trump won by even more. So, in a sense, Nikki Haley, she's still got dozens of primaries to contest in. I think many political scientists and commentators would argue if she couldn't win New Hampshire, it's going to be increasingly difficult going forward. But against that, she's getting increasing recognition. She's got powerful financial support from the Koch brothers. They can sustain her for quite a long time.
Yep.
And incidental factors may hurt Trump on the way forward. So I think she's right to say it's not over yet. She's lost, in the two contests so far, Trump has won both. He's got to be favourite to get the nomination. But, I think we've been around politics long enough to know things don't always go according to the early rounds of a contest.
No, that's very true. I like how you say incidentals, and I think those incidentals are 91 felony charges or whatever it is, and 4 court cases. Just an incidental, But he could. I mean, a lot of people are saying of Trump right now, he wins or he goes to prison. So it'll be interesting to see, therefore, what's going to happen.
Yeah, it will be, and I do think the distractions are likely to become quite intense for Mr. Trump because he's. As I understand it, he's facing the next round of legal proceedings in March. It's not far away, and that will be in the sort of middle part, or not quite the middle part, but still the formative stages of the primary process. So, I mean, I still think from Haley's point of view, the crucial thing she's got to do now is, I suppose, to build on the recognition that with DeSantis dropping out after the Iowa caucus, that she's the alternative, and she's got to try to present herself as a credible alternative. Whether she'll succeed in that, I have no idea. But I wouldn't count her out yet.
There were some commentators in the States. Well, there's always a commentator you can find to say something. But there were some saying that she may well drop out if she loses New Hampshire. But she's come out quite recently saying vows to fight on. I wonder if part of her tactic in vowing to fight on, I mean, I hear what you're saying, right? What do they say? A week is a long time in politics.
Yeah.
But looking at the polling, she's not doing particularly well. New Hampshire seemed to be her best one. And if she had won New Hampshire, that would have then perhaps given her not just her recognition growing, but actually some wind in her sails to say, look, I can beat him. But the other thing is, if Donald Trump does end up being tied up in courtrooms and perhaps for longer, and maybe can't be the nominee for various reasons, they need to have a second choice. And I wonder if she's just sticking around for that.
Possibly, but I think also sometimes politics can be a bit of a long game. We tend to look at each contest in themselves, and that's fair enough. But I think there's also a sense with someone who was third, considered to be the third candidate of the 3 front runners. She's quickly established herself as number 2, and she's had a respectable showing in New Hampshire, where she had theoretically a good chance of winning. Yeah. But I think she could build on this. And the South Carolina is going to be important for her. I don't think she'll win South Carolina. But as I say, I still think Trump has, it's Trump's contest to lose, really. But, the crucial thing, I think, is how many Republicans, moderate Republicans, decide they will invest in Haley and Nikki Haley as the alternative. Yeah, that's a crucial factor. It seems like she did quite well in New Hampshire on that front, but many American commentators are saying she still isn't really connecting with or making inroads into Trump's base. And that will be a difficult task for her.
You say she's not really likely to win South Carolina. I guess the obvious question is, when is she going to start to win? Because really it's a
Yeah,
two-horse race now, and if she keeps coming second every single time, she still doesn't get there. So she's got to start winning at some stage, and then
sure.
make that winning so dominant that Trump has no path. I just can't. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I can't see that happening. I mean, I can't see that happening.
Well, no, you're probably absolutely right, Pat. But what I was struck by was the poll suggested there would be a 22% gap between Trump and Haley coming in second. In fact, she defied the polls. It seems to be an 11 to 12 point gap between Trump. Now, Mr. Trump would love her to give up now.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that he was so frustrated with the fact she's remaining in the race. And if these legal problems mount, even some would-be Trump supporters might decide that they can't have a person in a presidential contest against Joe Biden, who it looks like Biden will get it,
Yeah.
who's got just huge legal problems. I don't know, but I think it would be premature to count Nikki Haley out at this stage.
Right.
It looks unlikely, but I do think if she continues to make progress, for example, if she gets beaten in South Carolina by 2 or 3%, that will encourage her even more.
Yeah, for sure.
And she may be clawing her way into this contest with Trump, but she really needs to be able to start connecting not just with moderate Republicans, but also, I think, with what I call slightly skeptical but still convinced Trump supporters, if you see what I mean. People who are committed to Trump, but, I mean, for example, you may have noticed, Pat, in some of his recent rallies, some Trump supporters have actually physically left.
Yeah,
Have
walking
walked
out.
Yeah.
Like when he was talking about Nikki Haley being responsible
Yeah.
for not calling the
That was
guards
interesting
into
to me.
January the 6th. Yeah.
That wasn't happening, as far as I know, in 2016.
Yeah. Yeah, no, very true. Also, the idea of what could have happened. It's like if the GOP in general, the bigger body and the leadership within there, had have had the balls, the nous, the courage to actually stand up to Trump when he lost and make it very clear he had lost and hadn't kissed the ring and bowed and genuflected before him, and actually had to come out saying this was fair, he lost, rather than either overtly or covertly amplified his message of this was stolen, he probably wouldn't be the problem to them that he is today. But they didn't, and so on some level the GOP leadership has got themselves into this position by actually not being honest themselves, and so now they're stuck with him, whether that's a good or bad thing. He is the GOP at the moment.
Absolutely. And there's one other factor, Pat, that we should consider going forward. And that is if Mr. Trump, as he progresses through the primaries, even if he continues to win, if he looks like he can't beat Biden, and a lot of polls at the moment have him beating Biden, but if that changes, one issue that Biden's already playing is the fact that Mr. Trump is a threat to democracy, which actually, surprisingly, has strikes quite a chord amongst the moderate Republicans, in particular in the Republican Party. So, yeah, there's some things going forward that might also dissipate support for Mr. Trump, even amongst some of the diehards, if they believe their representative has no chance of displacing Biden.
I've seen some research talking about if he does get a conviction, if he's found guilty, a bunch of moderates will not vote for him. It doesn't mean they'll switch over and vote for Biden, but it could be an exit of a 1, 2, 3, 5, who knows, percentage of voters that then just couldn't vote for him. Hey, look, do you want to comment on that before I ask you about the Houthi? But
no, that's fine. No, that's fine.
Just because we've got you as well, an international relations scholar, and talking about what's happening in the Middle East. We've had this conversation last night, and we're probably going to have it tomorrow night as well. I'm interested in a couple of things about the government committing 6 people to the region to help in the fight against the Houthi. And they are, it's obviously a symbolic gesture, because what are 6 people going to do? It can't be anything more than symbolic. But what does it symbolize? And what do you think about the government making this stand to send these 6 people, 6 service people across?
Well, I think the first thing we have to establish is the government insists there is no linkage between the unceasing or unrelenting Israeli and American-backed military offensive or military assault on Gaza and the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. And I think that claim there's no connection has led the government to, on that basis, to further claim that almost the Houthi attacks have come out of the blue, it's piracy, and that we have a long-standing commitment to maritime security in the Red Sea, and therefore we're simply acting in a way which is consistent with past New Zealand governments, and we are contributing to trying to uphold the rule of law in the Red Sea. I'm skeptical about that explanation because it seems to me the government, one thing we should be quite clear about is the government seems to be contradicting its own policy.
Yeah.
On the 27th of October and on the 13th of December, New Zealand, on the 27th of October, it voted in the General Assembly. It was the only member of the Five Eyes to do so for an immediate humanitarian truce. Then it co-sponsored a resolution on the 13th of December, which demanded an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. So, and guess who opposed that? The United States and the United Kingdom. So we now find ourselves in a position where, despite indicating our strong desire for an immediate ceasefire, we are backing countries which have, if you like, defied New Zealand's diplomatic wishes and continued to support Israel in its in its military campaign in Gaza, which has killed close to 25,000 Palestinians and created what can only be described as a humanitarian catastrophe. About 70% of the civilians killed are women and children, more than 10,000 Palestinian children. So we're talking about large numbers of civilians who had nothing to do with the appalling terrorist attacks that Israel experienced on the 7th of October. So most people, it looks like disproportionate offensive. So we're in a situation now where we seem to be contradicting our own early stance in demanding a ceasefire. And one of the reasons many countries, including New Zealand, wanted an early ceasefire, because apart from the humanitarian consideration, there was a strategic consideration that this terrible conflict in Gaza could spread to the region. And now, and that's why the United States, immediately after it started its unconditional support for Israel after the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October, that's why it immediately deployed 2 warships to the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. So, you know, I don't understand why the government is now claiming the situation in Gaza has little to do with the situation in the Red Sea. I think for most international observers, including the 160 states which voted for an immediate ceasefire in the General Assembly, the Houthis, and it's not trying to condone it, what the Houthis are doing is probably unacceptable. They are using missiles and offensive weaponry against civilian shipping, which is perceived to be linked to Israel. They're doing that because the UN Security Council, which is the primary institution for maintaining peace and security, has been hamstrung by the 3 vetoes from the United States. And the world has been watching almost from an armchair as Israel implements its intensive bombardment and its ground offensive, which has killed, as we said before, large numbers of Palestinian civilians. And I think that there was always the prospect that other parties in the region would act to further their interests. Iran and its axis of resistance, including the Houthis, but also the Hezbollah in Lebanon, we have to take into account that, yes, they may be genuinely concerned about the Palestinians, but they will also be happy to, in a sense, exploit the plight of the Palestinians to project the interests of a regional actor like Iran. Why? Because, as we know, the conflict in the Middle East is not just between Israel and its Arab neighbors, but also between a fault line in Islam between Shia and Sunni. And, for example, we saw the conflict in Yemen between the Houthis, which are Shia and supported by Iran, and the Sunni coalition government, 65, which represents about 65% in ethnicity terms of the population, which is supported by Saudi Arabia. So, in a sense, there was this inability to bring a ceasefire to Gaza quickly was always full of the prospect of the conflict spreading. And the Houthis have made it quite clear that they have started attacking or targeting civilian merchant shipping or civilian commercial shipping in order to try to force a ceasefire. They said they will stop all such activity as soon as there is a ceasefire. So I'm not saying we should embrace a ceasefire because of what the Houthis are doing. I'm saying that we should immediately move to a ceasefire because it's the right thing to do, diplomatically, morally, and legally. You know, one thing I found very interesting about the government's response is they said, we're just simply trying to do what all previous New Zealand governments, which is uphold the rule of law in the Red Sea. Well, that's compartmentalizing things a bit, isn't it? Because what about the rule of law in Gaza, where both Hamas and Israel have basically trashed humanitarian law? And we need the rule of, if we're going to be consistent about this, and I think most Kiwis across the political divide believe in a fair go, but if we're going to uphold the rule of law internationally, we can't create an artificial distinction between the situation in the Red Sea, where the rule of law is being undermined, and Gaza, where it's also being blatantly undermined.
Hey, Robert, if you've got just one more second, we've got a young man in our green room right now, a great friend of the show, and I know he wanted to talk about this, so he may have a question for you.
Sure.
People may not have met this man before, but his name is Chewy, and he's just back from the United States of America, and he's been popping in and out of the thing all night, and I've been seeing you, Chewy. I don't know if you got my text messages, but if you've got a second to go, Robert, Chewy was keen to talk about this. So Chewy, welcome. Let's talk about where you've been, what you've been doing shortly. But have you got anything you want to ask Robert about the situation with the Houthi?
I don't know if I directly have a question about it, but what has struck me about this, right, is all the major players, Britain and the US, seem to have jumped on these guys as almost a distraction. That they can't, for whatever reason, influence what's going on in Palestine at the moment. But here is a really clear-cut Islamic bad guys attacking civilian shipping, and we can do something with that. We can be seen to be springing into action in ways that we just haven't, in a way of preventing what's happening in Palestine, or in the case of Ukraine. Sort of, we're helping, but not really helping. Is this just a case of it being picking low-hanging fruit?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I do think the Biden administration is under enormous pressure. I mean, there's been very worrying signs. There's been the abandoned Biden movement going on amongst young Muslims in the United States. Yeah. And there's been, all polling evidence suggests, and this is unprecedented, for the first time, polls are suggesting that many people are beginning to favor the Palestinian side of the long-running argument with Israel. So in a sense, by putting a lot of emphasis on, if you like, deterring the Houthis, and that, by the way, those attempts at a deterrence don't seem to be working so far.
Yeah.
The Houthis seem to be relishing the confrontation with the UK and the US. And that's worrying, because one thing that Pat and I were just discussing was the New Zealand dispatch of 6 NZD personnel. And one thing that government owes to the people of this country is to say what the political objective of dispatching those forces are.
Because it does send a clear message to the world that New Zealand is on board with Israel.
Well, they need to be absolutely clear.
Yeah.
I mean, there was the great strategist, Karl von Clausewitz, and he said, no one but a fool enters a conflict without defining the political objective of participating in the conflict. In other words, you can't simply sign up for something where you don't know where it's going. At the moment, the situation in the Red Sea, there's no evidence that the UK and the US are deterring the Houthis and their Iranian backers. But you could be right, Chewy, that the Americans have seized upon this to try to regain a bit more international support. I think it's very difficult for the United States, because they seem to have an absolute blind spot with regard to the Netanyahu government. I mean, Mr. Netanyahu is defying the Americans on in many areas. The Israeli government has shown no ability to distinguish between civilian and military casualties, and doesn't seem to be doing much to try to rectify that problem. In addition, Mr. Netanyahu has been quite adamant and proud of the fact that he has no intention of ever, while he's in power, of allowing a Palestinian state. He gave an extraordinary interview on the 16th and 17th of December last year, where he said he took great pride in playing a major role in denying the Palestinian state for the last 30 years, and he will continue to do that in the future. And of course, he, once again, in the last few days, has reiterated this. Now, the official position of the United States backing Israel against Hamas for the day after, as it's called, once they've defeated Hamas, is to create a two-state solution. So America finds itself in an extraordinary situation where it's continuing to arm an ally which has no intention of responding to America's political preferences when the conflict is over. They're quite happy to accept American military support, but not American political prescriptions. So it is an extraordinary situation. Yes, maybe the Red Sea is a distraction. I don't think, however, those who claim there is no connection between the Gaza conflict and the Red Sea will win the argument. I think in the eyes of most people, it's quite clear what is the central dynamic driving tension in the region. It is the unrelenting bombardment of Gaza.
Hey, Robert, thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to let you go. I just want to say one other thing, and then we're not asking you another question, though, so consider this wrapped now. But the one thing I thought about tonight was I was listening to Geoffrey Miller. I think he was on One News. And Geoffrey Miller, who was a geopolitical analyst, for people who don't know him, I've actually asked him to come on tomorrow night, talked about this event of sending the 6 armed service people may end up costing us our independence, and the world sees New Zealand as an independent sort of, you know, if you think back to the no nukes, all that. And I just thought about it afterwards. It got me quite angry, actually, because I thought, how dare this government, how dare the Prime Minister put at threat this thing that New Zealand has built up of independence for so long, for so many years, across so many governments, and then one decision by a new government could put all of that to sea. And I just thought, how dare they? If this ends up happening, this will be the worst decision New Zealand's made for New Zealand on a world map. It's just what I thought.
No, I think it's a really valid observation by Geoffrey. And the thing that really strikes me, that there's been a huge disconnect between the political parties in this country and I think the average person on the street, so to speak. on this issue. I mean, many Kiwis, I said this before to Pat, across the political divide have a sense of fairness. And I think many people felt horrified that our political representatives, first of all, there was the excuse of the transition in early October.
Yeah.
And then there was the protracted negotiations. And then we had a new government. And the government seemed to be doing the right thing in the UN General Assembly, but not really speaking up. And I think many people overseas have been very disappointed by the fact this is the country that defied a superpower over non-nuclear security. And this was the country under Helen Clark which said no to the US's illegal invasion of Iraq. We refused to participate in it. Have we spoken up at the level of the leadership of this country on behalf of the Palestinians who've been let down by the international community because the UN Security Council, which whose job is to protect and maintain international peace, have been hamstrung by the veto? In other words, there was a vacuum and we remained silent. And silence is complicity. That's how it will be seen by Palestinians. And then I think Jeffrey's right. This will be seen, I think. We can't control the narrative internationally or the perceptions, but there's a real risk, as Jeffrey suggests, that we'll be seen as paying lip service to having independent foreign policy, but essentially returning to the Anglosphere.
Professor Robert Patman, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. I always apologize at the end of these chats because we always go far longer than we ever agree to. And you're on holiday, but thank you for joining us. Everyone in the chat loves you.
Great to speak to you guys.
Very keen to have you on board. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hey, Chewy.
Hey, mate. How's it going?
Good. I just want to say one thing. Obviously, we all want to know about you and your trip and stuff, but the one thing I thought as Robert was speaking then, talking about the no nukes and the Helen Clark. There's a common thread. There's a common thread about governing bodies of this country during those things that set us up to be this international, shining light on a hill. And one of them was David Lange and a Labour government, and one of them was Helen Clark and a Labour government. Now we have our hairless leader coming on board, and according to at least one geopolitical analyst, putting all of that at threat by making a symbolic gesture that is going to that allows the world to look at us and go, oh, they're on Israel's side.
I said many choice words, like the good top shelf words.
Ooh.
When I read that story,
yeah,
about Luxon committing us to this, not able to make a definitive comment that what Israel is doing wrong, really walking that line of weasel words and that sort of thing. And then I saw the press conference with him and Winston being asked questions by the press, and he just literally hot potatoed the question to Winston, and Winston did what Winston does and goes on the attack rather than giving us a straight answer of like, do we not think of a Palestinian two-state solution? What's going on? Where has this come from? What possible benefit does New Zealand get from contributing Defence Force personnel to this? We're not required. We're not needed. It paints us into a corner.
Yeah, but Christopher Luxon's evangelical friends will be happy that we're there for Israel. We talk. Remember how much the National Party were concerned about conflicts of interest when it came to the Labour Party. How about Israel and a prime minister who was an evangelical Christian? And evangelical Christians pledge their undying support. How about a conflict of interest there? Anyway, look, I know you want to talk about this. I've actually sent Jeffrey Miller a message. Hopefully we'll get him tomorrow night. We'll see what happens. But I'm happy to keep talking about this if you want to. But we also want to know about your trip. So which is more important at the moment, the American trip or?
I've got a little segue here.
Okay, let's hear it.
I've spoken to quite a few Americans in the past couple of weeks.
Of course.
And I want to say, what a delightful group of people. Look, it might be flavoured by the way that I was travelling or the thing that I was there to see. But
or the whiskey.
Americans have a view of New Zealand, and I guess if I was to put it in a nice, neat little tidy box, it is not the New Zealand that Christopher Luxon is representing. It is not the image that he's putting out in the world. The number one thing that got brought up was, you had that lady president, prime minister, that did such a good job on COVID. How's she? What's happening there?
Yeah.
That was by far what got brought up every time. The other thing that they brought up in conversation was that they are all very worried about this election. They are worried
American
about
election.
Yes,
Yeah.
the upcoming American election.
Gotcha.
They are worried that Trump is still there. They are worried that January 6th was just a test run. And like when I'm talking about this, I have one person in mind. I traveled by train from San Francisco to Denver. Dinner service was done at shared tables, and we, you just sat with people. One of the nights, a guy came up, and I'm talking like cowboy. He had the big hat, he had the shirt, he had boots, the whole thing, and my wife Claire and I were like, "Oh shit, okay, we better watch our opinions here."
But he
offered his opinions very freely. This is a horse rancher from North Colorado, Fort Collins, Colorado, and he was just like, "These people are insane." That I don't think he was. He didn't say whether he was a Republican or a Democrat. He was just like, "These people are crazy. The people that they represent are crazy.
Yeah.
The issues that they put on the forefront are crazy. Our country is in jeopardy." And he was deadly serious about it. So, it's one thing to look at in America from a lens, as we do, from so far away. But the people that live there, they're not all lunatics. They're just normal people. And they're worried because they don't have somewhere to turn. They've got red or blue.
Yeah.
And that's it. They've got almost no say on who's in control of red or blue.
Yeah. Well, they don't.
One of the people that drove us from Denver up to the concert, she works in the US Senate.
Wow.
I guess their equivalent of parliamentary services.
Okay.
She said she watched January 6th happen, and she was able to count on the windows where her office was and could see people smashing in her window. She hasn't been back to her workplace. She's been working remotely ever since.
So she wasn't there when it was happening. She'd gotten out.
She wasn't there when it was happening.
Gotcha.
She was on medical leave, but she could watch that and see them break into basically the same level that her office was in, and she hasn't been back since. She's terrified.
Wow.
So I think America is a very broken country, and I for a lot of reasons. My God, the homeless problem over there.
Especially in San Francisco, because you were there, weren't you? You in San Francisco?
I was in San Francisco. I was in Denver. It was minus 22 degrees, and there were people on the streets.
Wow.
Like it's crazy. You're in San Francisco. It was around Oakland and that sort of thing, and yeah, you're gonna see homeless. But in any major Western city, I think you're gonna see it, right? But what blew me away is every bridge, every alleyway, people living in cars, tents, that sort of thing, and we're going along the railway line, and it's way out of town. Like, we're talking like little regional satellite towns and that sort of thing still have people living homeless. It is a stain on such a wealthy, insanely wealthy country.
The wealthiest.
Yeah. That they had this problem that they cannot, you can bomb Yemen in a heartbeat. You can funnel weapons to an ally that doesn't give a fuck about what you're asking them to do. You can bitch and argue about how much money's been given to Ukraine, but they can't solve the homeless problem. They can approve 13 new aircraft carriers to be built, though. 13. That's fine. 13. They need them because China might decide to fuck up everything and where they sit in the world, making everybody shit because they might make a lunge at Taiwan. They need 13 aircraft carriers. Yeah, there is no trickle down. It felt like over there, almost like you need to see people living on the streets for their system to work. Right, because it's a lesson, right? Work hard, don't rock the boat. This could be you. You get sick, this is you. You lose your job, this is you. There is zero safety net. I think in San Francisco, which is seen as a very liberal city, that does have some sort of safety net. Do you know what that safety net is?
What's that?
$291 a month if you have no income.
So $75 a week.
Yeah.
Not even.
And here's the other thing. What we found in the US is everything's New Zealand prices, but in US dollars.
Yeah.
It is so expensive just to exist over there.
Right.
And that's without healthcare. That you're relying on religious social services and the Salvation Army and food banks and that sort of thing to live. If things go wrong, if you make a mistake, if you have some mental health issue, if you get cancer. Terrifying.
I feel like we'll be getting lessons from Chewy over his experiences in the US over the next wee while. But how about for now, why don't we continue with some lessons from New Zealand? Because in the last night or so, we've been talking about Ratana Chewy, and Ratana continued on today with the government turning up. We talked to an author last night, we had some technical difficulties because we have to, it's our rules. Talking about Ratana the man and who he was and stuff. We talked to Debbie Naruapaka on Monday night, and she told us a bit about Ratana. And so tonight is the day that the actual government turns up. I should stop that music playing, I guess. Now I've done all my jazz fingers. Is that what it is? No, jazz hands, isn't it? Jazz hands. So here's News Hub tonight talking about the government turning up to Ratana and the welcome they got.
Tēnā tātou katoa, good evening. A three-headed taniwha, the enemy of Maori. That's how the government has been described at Ratana today, as it was given a strong message from Maori not to mess with the treaty.
The usually quiet crowds at Ratana.
Got to say as well, and I might stop it as it goes through, the words from Christopher Luxon I'm still not convinced by. Right? I won't mess with the treaty. Well, people are saying the principles of the treaty is not actually the treaty. It's something beside the treaty to help define the treaty. We have no intention to support this bill after its first reading. Yeah, but that means they could change. No journalist yet that I know of, and I'm annoyed by this because we would, has said, is there a possibility you could turn this into a conscious vote? Because then National's not voting for it. That's what he's promised. National's not voting for it, but maybe a lot of National MPs would. No one's asked him that question yet. So I'm just highlighting, I guess, the language that gets used, which to me feels, as probably we expect, but very political, and there feels like there are some outs there. And lots in the mainstream media are just saying carte blanche. No, they're not. It's not going to get passed because they're not going to support it. I'm like, I'm not as confident of that as a lot of the mainstream media because I don't hear it as unequivocal as they say Luxon is saying. So we'll keep going.
This year making it very clear how they feel. Here's political editor Jenna Lynch.
Tubas and trombones, the familiar uplifting tones of the Ratana brass band was the most welcoming sound they'd hear today. In speech after speech, the government taken to task. Labelled a three-headed taniwha.
One day a taniwha went swimming in the moana.
The enemy of Maori.
It's the ranks of the coalition government.
Sending a crystal clear message. Don't touch the treaty.
The Tiriti o Waitangi is sacrosanct in our
There's also been some conversation, Chair, about why won't David Seymour attend. I give you Exhibit A. This is why David Seymour will not attend, because compared to the tongue lashing these guys are getting, he would get it times 10. So that would be my Exhibit A, I would say.
our view. We don't expect to be just spoken to. We want the opportunity to be walking side by side. If there is any measure of meddling with Te Tiriti o Waitangi, Maori will not sit idly by.
The Prime Minister pledging to honour it.
The government has no plans and never has had plans to amend or to revise the treaty or the treaty settlements that we have all worked so hard together to achieve.
But doesn't say anything about the principles. You see, I'm just saying.
Principles.
Because no one anywhere has suggested that there's going to be a change in the treaty. It's always been about the principles of the treaty. It's always been about the definition we give to the treaty to help us use the treaty. No one said, and what he's saying is, I promise you that we will not do what no one has said will not do. You know, they're pointless words. You know what I'm saying?
This is what I said last year, right? Is that we've got to be careful not with how we describe what they're doing. Like, of course, they're not messing with the treaty. That would be crazy. Yeah. But if we mess with how people interpret the treaty, how the courts will apply it, it's weaselly. Yeah.
And because even when he says we will honour the treaty, I actually believe that is a relative statement, because how one person or group or organisation honours it may be different to another. You know what I'm saying? Like, to honour the treaty depends on the interpretation of the treaty, depends on which version of the treaty, and it depends if you have changed the principles or defined some principles of the treaty, and then you honour as it's being defined. So even that doesn't give me cause for feeling safe. You know what I mean?
Well, right down to the point. Are we talking about the treaty or are we talking about Te Tiriti?
Yeah. Well, yeah. All right, keep going.
The government will honour the treaty.
What does that mean?
While his coalition partners scolded the speakers for bringing politics onto this pie,
Haere mai ki Waitangi.
saying Waitangi was the place for this conversation.
I love debate. Come to Waitangi. I will see you there. Tēnā koutou katoa.
The usually silent crowd
I may have achieved the distinction of being the first politician ever to be booed at Ratana.
making their voices heard.
Well, face up to it. That's the way Maori are. Not blaming everybody else. Do you see that?
That doesn't give you pause for thought, being called a three-headed taniwha and the enemy of Māori?
No, what I'm focused on is making sure that I have good conversation with Māori leaders, which I have been doing over the last year or so.
I sense that the mania that gripped iwi in the seabed and foreshore is starting to trickle through over the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi.
The government's agenda dominated Ratana's agenda, front and centre the ACT Party's Treaty Principles Bill.
I think the only one that needs lesson 101 on Te Tiriti o Waitangi is David Seymour.
I give you Exhibit B. Exhibit B, sir.
So, but I mean, he's not here to listen to the cries of the people.
National and New Zealand First have agreed to support the bill through a first reading in Parliament to be debated by the public at Select Committee. But that's where it ends.
Categorically, can you...
See, this is the thing. That's where it ends. What I'm talking about. Now, I guess I have to say it may end there, but the language that gets used is not as definite as what Jenna Lynch just said, in my opinion.
Rule out supporting the Treaty's Principles Bill past first reading?
Well, look, I've been really clear about it. As a coalition government, we don't have a commitment beyond first reading. And as you know, as a national party, we've had a long-standing position that we have no intention and no commitment to progressing a referendum. So it's pretty straightforward for us. Yeah.
For Novice Day.
Is there any scenario that you would support it past the first reading?
For goodness sake, I'm not wasting my time.
Dead legislation.
Did you hear that? Naff off.
Naff
I'm not
off.
wasting my time. That's the Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand speaking to a reporter. Naff off.
us. Yep.
Enough of novice day.
Is there any scenario that you would support it past the first reading?
For goodness sake, I'm not wasting my time.
Dead legislation walking, but its architect will not back down.
They've said that they have no commitment to go further. They've also never ruled out going further, so that's good enough for me.
Holding out hope as his bill creates fear.
God.
So,
did you hear that, Pat? Did you hear that? Vaginas the world over just slamming shut at a man that has just almost terminal levels of no riz at all, David Seymour. I think you're exactly right. We can't trust this. We can't trust Luxon. I saw an interview where he was asked basically the same thing, and he just went, "We've committed to supporting it on its first reading. We've committed to supporting it for the first reading." Yeah, but are you going to support it further than that? I'll be very clear. We've committed to supporting it to the first reading. He is avoiding that question. And is there anything in his history that suggests that we should trust him, believe him in any sort of way? Like, I don't know if you've covered this while I've been away, but have you seen the difference in the principles that Seymour's talking about?
One of the biggest ones that we have covered, because we spoke to Debbie on Monday night, was one of the changes from Te Tiriti making it very clear that there's an exclusive relationship between the Crown and Maori. One of the biggest changes is they want to put into the principles that it's between Crown and all New Zealanders. So in other words, Maori are no longer the signatories to the treaty. All New Zealanders signed onto it. That's one of the biggest ones.
Yeah. So I've got them here in front of me, the 1989 principles. And just scream out if you think any of these are unfair. The government has the right to govern and make laws. That seems good. Iwi have the right to organise as iwi and, under the law, to control their resources as their own. Both the government and iwi are obliged to accord each other reasonable cooperation on major issues of common concern. The government is responsible for providing effective processes for the resolution of grievances and the expectation of reconciliation can occur. All New Zealanders are equal under the law. So that's what it's been framed as since 1989. Seymour has less detail than that. The New Zealand government has the right to govern New Zealand. The New Zealand government will protect all New Zealanders' authority over their land and other property. All New Zealanders are equal under the law with the same rights and duties. The devil is not just in the detail, it's in the gaps. Yeah. It's all over that. Like, I don't see how any fair-minded person can look at those first principles 1989 and go, oh yeah, here's our major issue.
Yeah.
Like, it's a disaster.
Well, let me say this as well. I kind of, you think things over and then you think about it and you think about it again. The thing I thought today was they're talking about, especially people like Brooke Van Velden in her very chosen, clever way, talking about how we've got so much division in New Zealand and we want to see a united New Zealand. We want to bring people together, and they're talking about that this referendum will do that, right? Now, I know we all laugh when we hear that, but I don't think what they've realised is it's worse than we've been taking the piss about the division, because this is literally going to piss off half the country no matter what happens. Because if the referendum goes through, you've got half the country who don't want to see it, who think that this is just basically is underpinned by white supremacy, as was said in the weekend at the Hui, right? So that those people are going to be completely divided off. Or if it doesn't go through, the people that are sitting, all the ACT supporters and New Zealand First supporters, they're all going to be unhappy. So the point is, they're talking about not stirring up division and we want to be a united country, X, Y, Z. Actually, no matter what happens with this, whether it's there or not there, this is going to do nothing more than create copious amounts of division, worse than we're thinking of right now. So it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. It's hoisted by one's own petard. It's actually the definition of that, because what they're doing, it's actually so bad, I actually have to start to think maybe it is what they're trying to do surreptitiously, is it will, no matter how it goes, one way or the other, create a worse, more divided New Zealand.
Yeah, like I got a couple of thoughts on that. Like, these guys have really pounced on this whole divided New Zealand thing, right? And I think that has come out of the COVID response, right? And when we saw protests, and very visible protests and that sort of thing. Remember, over 80% of this country agreed with what we did. Like, that's not yes, there's always, you're never going to get 100% of people agreeing that that's the right way to go, right? But at this point, we started talking about this divided New Zealand because we saw something we haven't seen since the Springbok fucking tour. You know, we had people really angry enough to go on a camping exhibition to Parliament Lawn. We saw some shocking responses from that. And we have got some very divided people that have spent too much time on the internet and they think there's chemtrails and there's all sorts of stuff. But that was the seed for that language of this divided country rhetoric. And I'm sorry, I just don't see it. We've got our issues. We've got our debates one way or the other. We've been talking about the treaty for a long time, and we it's been contentious, but we've made progress. There's more understanding now than there ever has been, in my living memory anyway. And I think when we get into this sort of thing, when you listen to Seymour and his crew, that we don't want to talk about Maori or Pākehā or anything. It's just New Zealanders. We just make a lovely beige colour, and there's no hits where everyone's got the same starting line, and it's just a fiction.
Yeah.
The silver lining, I think, if this does push through, and it's not a great silver lining in my view, but this I think is a rip the Band-Aid moment here, is that rather than this slow, steady progress that we've had, or this back and forth and legal positioning and negotiations and that sort of thing, we're going to have a push comes to shove moment. What was it? 12,000 people turned out to that hui last week.
They're saying 10, but yeah, we don't know the exact number. 10ish.
Okay, 10, 12, way more than anybody ever expected, right? And then we've had this absolute incendiary one at Ratana. I don't think Māori are going to let this go, and I don't think they should. This is an existential threat. And I think, I don't like if Seymour's going, the Māori are just 18% of the population. If I talk about democracy enough, it'll go away because democracy is just numbers. This is not something that boils down to numbers. This is not something that necessarily even boils down to Māori and non-Māori. Like, if Māori are going to the streets on this, I'll be with them.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think there will be a lot of non-Māori that will join them. And we seem to be getting a lot of practicing on protest lately because there's a weekly protest about Palestine. And I don't think these guys see what they're stirring up. But is this a moment that is going to be ugly, but is hopefully going to clean the wound a bit so we can go, okay, cool, we've had this fucking discussion now. We're moving forward. We're not going backwards. That's my only silver lining out of this whole thing, is that Seymour gets his shit run hard enough that this discussion is put away for 20 years.
Chewy, I've done a couple of shows by myself and they've been around about an hour long, but it's good having you back because I've been missing the 90-minute, 60-minute show. So lovely to see you. Ethan says, do you think based off ACT's third principle in their proposed bill, it could lead to the removal of the Māori electorates? You want to read, what's the third principle? Do you want to read it out? Have you got it there still?
Third, all New Zealanders are equal under the law with the same rights and duties. And that phrase, the same rights and duties, you look back at everything that Seymour has been talking about is this. That is the point that he keeps on hammering, that we all have the same rights and duties. That is not how a treaty works.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
And he keeps on framing it as like, well, there's Māori and there's Pākehā, obviously just white people are Pākehā. What about the Indians? What about the Chinese people? What about trying to... It's not racist because I'm thinking about the other races, right? So you can't call me a racist. But that's fine. They can't, like, you talk to anybody that studied the treaty, and it's like everybody that is non-Maori is covered by that treaty. It's just a fiction. It's weaselly moving of the goalposts, and that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to fiddle with the pieces on the board and say he's not fucking with the game, but he absolutely is. And I think that whole thing of the same rights and duties is, we're all the same rights and duties. Obviously, we don't have Māori seats. Yeah. We don't have confirmed Māori membership on council boards.
Māori Health Authority.
Māori Health Authority. And we know where that's going to go, because they're 18% of the population. So they get less than that in funding. You know, we have no specific funding for Māori. There's no carve-outs. It's just a mystery why they're 50% of the prison population, why they're underachieving on everything. Because we've all the same rights and duties.
Yeah.
So it must be them.
Yeah. Also, Peter says,
white supremacist bullshit.
Thank you for the super chats, Peter. Māori are the only hope of keeping New Zealand assets in New Zealand.
100%.
And
100%.
Finally, $20 super chat from Kiwi Skirt. That's very generous. Thank you, Kiwi Skirt. Hit that like, people. Do it. You know you want to, with a thumbs up. Thank you guys for your super chats. I appreciate that. Now, I'll just say this now. Super chats aren't essential to have your comments used, but we've gotten to a size where the comments fly by, and just as a matter of logistics, sometimes they're easier to see. So not telling you we only use super chats now, but they stay up and they highlight themselves, so they're sometimes easier to find. Just one
little thing to say as well. This is a big part of why you see David Seymour at a Hindu shindig.
Oh,
this is this is a big part of the reason why you see ACT appealing to Chinese voters as well. Is that's how he wants to shift the needle and get his share more, increase his share of the vote by appealing to those groups and saying that you are a third-class citizen because you're not Māori and you're not Pākehā, and I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And by being ethnically diverse, you are my shield against that whole thing that I am a white supremacist.
I've got a gay friend, that kind of bullshit.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think when you look at other aspects of it, like the Hindu shooting that he went to the other day, that group, we've spoken about them a little bit, Modi's Hindu nationalists, which are basically anti-Islam as well. Then again, that is David Seymour cozying up to anti-Islam positions, anti-Muslim positions, and actors. So again, it doesn't matter what color he's cuddling up to. It's all white supremacy.
Speaking of, what a great segue, sir. It's almost like we've freaking done this before. If you are speaking of like super chats, yada yada, as we've said, the full interview with Professor Mohan Dutta is on Patreon right now, patreon.com/Big Hairy News. It's about 25 minutes, and we made a decision probably a year ago that for those big long interviews, we probably put them in their full on Patreon. They might go in their full to YouTube, but if you are a patron, you can see it right there. If you're not a patron, you can become one, and you can see it right there. I have also released a couple of clips on my Twitter feed. There's a really important clip here. It's 5 minutes long, because we're about to talk about this slogan, this call. It's actually a prayer, Jai Shree Ram, that David Seymour has used. And what I wanted to know, which you won't hear in the clip that I'm about to show you, but it is on my Twitter feed, is has that prayer been co-opted by this group? You know how USA has been co-opted by a group of Americans, and whilst chanting USA isn't in and of itself a political statement, when you put context to it, we know who you are and why you're using it. So I asked him a question about the context and had it been co-opted or was it always there? That's on Twitter. But Shree, if you're good for it, what we'll do right now is we're going to play, this is 2 parts of the 25-minute conversation I had with Professor Dutta. I'm playing the first part of it, which actually does the setup in case you're not aware of the story we're talking about, and then about the last 10 minutes. Because in the last 10 minutes, we really delve deep down into What does this say? It's a bit like the conversation around Israel and Gaza and those 6 servicemen. What does David Seymour, using this saying, convey to the rest of the world? What does it convey to the alt-right fascist political spectre in India? And these are terms that Professor Dutta brings up, not my terms necessarily. And what does it convey to Indian Muslims living in New Zealand who are still on the edge after the Christchurch massacre, right? Because remember, Mr. Seymour was very, very, very keen for us to be extremely offended by from the river to the sea. Now, from the river to the sea is interpreted by different people to mean different things, but one thing can be said, it is however you interpret it, it is a hypothetical future of something that could possibly happen. Whereas this saying, and you'll hear the professor talking about it, Jai Shree Ram, is a slogan, a prayer, a saying that's used today in the name of violence. And historically, it's been used in association with violence. So there's no sort of, well, this is what they mean in a multiverse. This is used today as a violent call to action. From the river to the sea is some kind of ethereal, this is what they want to do in the future, but they're not doing it now. Whereas this is actually being used in violent context at the moment. So I know I talk about it in this clip, I won't set it up too much more, but you know, even if we were being generous and saying that Mr. Seymour was being used as a useful idiot, I think he needs to address this because this has portrayed New Zealand, much like the sending of the 6 service people, in a certain light to a certain sector of the world that needs to be sorted out. Now, that's all I've got for a very long intro, Chewy. Is there anything you want to say before we fire it off? It's about 10 minutes.
No, go for it.
All right, team, we will play this for you, and so you can see what's going on, so you know what's happening, and we will be back shortly to catch up with you at the end of this conversation with myself from this afternoon and Professor Mohan Dutta. So this is at the event over the weekend at Eden Park in Auckland, and this is what he said. It's only, I think it might be 3 words, 2 or 3 words. It sounds like 2 words. It might be 3 words, and he says, Jai Shree Ram. Jai Shree Ram. Just listen to him saying it first of all.
Jai Shree Ram to the entire Bharat, and what a wonderful celebration of a monument that will last 1,000 years.
So there we go. The celebration was the consecration of a temple in India. That in of itself is controversial because the temple is on the site of a mosque, a former mosque. You'll have to correct me on these because I'm just getting the gist of it. And there's a lot of controversy even over the building of that temple on that site. If I'm correct in that very synopsized explanation, let's start off with Jai Shree Ram and let's learn from you what that means and what Mr. Seymour has actually said. And also, a bit like we talked about last night, what this actually says to a community about the New Zealand government now that he has said this. Sir.
Thank you so much, Pat. And that's an excellent summary. So to explain what the slogan Jai Shree Ram means and its connotation, we have to look a little bit at Hindutva, the far-right, almost fascist, cultural nationalist movement that really took form and gained momentum in India in the mid-1980s, and that is organized around transforming India as a Hindu nation or Hindu Rashtra based upon a monolithic Hindu jati or a Hindu race and a monolithic Hindu culture or Sanskriti. Now, Hindutva as a movement grew and drew its inspiration in the 1930s from the Nazi movements. And It is organized around the goal of constructing India as a Hindu nation or Hindu Rashtra. So the slogan then, Jai Shree Ram, is an organizing slogan of Hindutva that is established around initially this process of the destruction of the Babri Masjid. So the VHP or the Vishwa Hindu Parishad that has been classified as a militant organization in multiple registers organized the entire nation around the destruction of the mosque. And the way it organized is through hate speeches that were distributed through cassettes and then played on loudspeakers. This is the 1980s, early 1990s we are talking about, and through the chanting of the Jai Shri Ram slogan taken out as processions across the country in what would be called the Ratha Yatra, which ultimately led to the destruction of the mosque. Subsequently, then what we saw was a number of riots across India that saw a number of people dead, and a large proportion of them Muslims. And that slogan has been deployed for acts of violence, including in communal riots being chanted by Hindutva, in attacks on mosques. So you will see Hindutva processions chanting Jai Shri Ram as they attack mosques, in lynchings. Now, since the arrival of Narendra Modi, the current prime minister, into power, Hindutva has been legitimized, and what that has meant is that this kind of violence has become an everyday feature in across India. So when lynchings have been carried out targeting Muslims, the slogan Jai Shri Ram is chanted, and often then the Muslim person that is targeted is asked to chant that slogan as they are being lynched.
Now, I just want to bring it right back to where we started from as well, because this is an important part for us as New Zealanders to understand in our political sphere. We asked, what does Mr. Seymour using this statement say to that community? Does it say to them the New Zealand government supports your movement, or what does it say to them? But also, we talked about from the river to the sea. David Seymour himself, this is a tweet, if people are watching, can see that David Seymour says this from a tweet. I'm quoting him word for word. From the river to the sea appears in Hamas 27 constitution. Some people believe it means no Israel and even no Jewish people. UK Labour suspended an MP for using it last week. Our Jewish community lives in fear of anti-Semitism. Why aren't media asking her what she meant? So what I'm going to say to you and to the media in New Zealand is, why aren't media asking David Seymour what he meant when he said this controversial slogan? What should be happening now to address this by David Seymour? Like, I'm happy to accept maybe he's a useful idiot. Maybe there was a camera and they just said to him, oh, say this, it means welcome to the people. And he said it, but now it's been said, it's recorded, it'll go through that community you're talking about. What needs to happen next? And what does this say to that community? What does David Seymour need to do, if anything?
So, there are two parts to this. One is, you rightly pointed out to the chanting of the slogan. We also need to look at where that slogan is being chanted. It is being chanted in Eden Park at an event that is marking the celebration of the Ayodhya temple, which is a marker of the destruction of the Babri Masjid. So as a social scientist, I really can't get into intent. I don't understand what leads a politician into chanting a particular slogan that, say, is attached to very specifically a form of majoritarian populism that is deployed toward violence that is experienced by Muslims. But, there are 2 points that I want to articulate here. Is that the Indian community in Aotearoa is very diverse. It is not just the Hindu community. There are Sikhs, there are Muslims, there are Dalit community members. So the question worth us asking is, what is the message then to Muslim community members in Aotearoa, Muslim Indian community members in Aotearoa, particularly in the backdrop of the Christchurch extremist occurrences, and particularly in the backdrop of activists such as Anjum Rahman, who have been pointed out that Hindutva is of concern in Aotearoa and it is not being given enough attention by crown structures and by media. And Pat, here, I want us to be reminded that this was the same kind of warning signal that was being given by Muslim activists building up to Christchurch. So the question there is, what is the message that is being received by Muslims in Aotearoa? And we need to listen to those Muslim voices, particularly the voices of Muslim Indians who are terrorized by both the Ram Janmabhoomi event, the celebration of the Ayodhya temple, and the chanting of the slogan. Coming back to your question about media and media interrogation, there also seems to be a pattern here that needs to be critically interrogated. We need to ask questions such as, are there particular biases in the ways in which the media ask questions? For instance, are there built-in Islamophobic registers in how media ask questions, the kinds of media frames that are circulated, what is erased, what is obfuscated, and what is foregrounded? This process of backgrounding and foregrounding needs to be interrogated. So a chanting of a slogan such as Jai Shri Ram is actually connected to violence. Even after the unveiling of the temple, just yesterday, we see social media rife with incidences where Hindutva mobs are targeting Muslim shops and Muslim neighborhoods, chanting Jai Shri Ram as a duet. So I just posted something on my X account that shows that there are these Hindutva mobs that are throwing stones at Muslim shops in Muslim neighborhood in Mumbai while chanting that slogan. So there is real violence that is going on currently. So it is really callous in that sense to amplify that slogan, and for that not to be interrogated, particularly in Aotearoa. And this is significant given the context of Christchurch and the Royal Commission hearings on the attacks on the masjids.
So whilst you may not want to get into the deep weeds of this, it sounds to me like David Seymour, even if he has unwittingly supported this chant, should probably come out and retract and apologise. And as I've said twice now, he's been used as a useful idiot, needs to basically say, I didn't know what it meant, I didn't know the connotations, much like he was calling on Chloe Swarbrick to do for From the River to the Sea. If he is a man of honour and not a hypocrite, he now needs to do the same thing that he expects of other people to do when a slogan that is used has different meanings to different people. And as you say, because of the incidents in Christchurch as well, specifically here in New Zealand, what this may mean to Indian Muslims here, he needs to do something, at least explain that he was unaware of what it meant and apologise. That would be my position, at least anyway.
That makes sense. I also think that for the media, I will keep coming back to that. There is a critical component here in terms of looking at the funding of Hindutva, how its relationship is with the ACT party or with particular right-wing parties and those kinds of linkages. Because what I've heard from activists are there Hindutva-linked businesses or influential donors that are also linked with these political parties, which would then shape the kind of narrative making. That's one. The other point I want to also bring up is what I see, again, as a scientist who studies this phenomena, the convergence between the majoritarian populism of Hindutva and the majoritarian populism that catalyzes ACT and how ACT is organizing right now around the attacking of Teteriti and the messages around Maori. So one of the things I've seen on digital platforms in response to Mr. Seymour's posting this on his Facebook account, this event is particular posters that seem Hindutva posters going in and repeating the ACT messages, like this is about equality for all. Great that these changes are happening in Aotearoa. And I think we really need to look here in Aotearoa at the intersections of the anti-Maori sentiments that we are seeing. There has been quite a bit of good research on the role of networks like the Atlas Network in promoting that kind of anti-Maori sentiment and the relationship of that with the majoritarian populism of Hindutva. It seems like an archetypal feature of right-wing populist parties that are appealing to a far-right base.
I think that's very interesting, the point you made in that latest few comments about following the money to see the donors to ACT, who they were and if they're associated with this group or this belief system. Professor Mohan Dutta, thank you so much for joining us today. We really have appreciated chatting with you and bringing some more light to this. Hopefully we will get some answers from Mr. Seymour. Hopefully, at the very least, he'll be able to acknowledge that maybe for some people this wasn't the smartest or the best thing to say, and he can withdraw and apologise. But I guess, as they say, we shall throw this to the gods and see what comes from it, sir.
Kia ora. Thank you, Pat.
Alrighty, there you go, Chewy. I've seen that 2 or 3 times today because I edited it. You can jump at it, mate. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a huge issue. Like obviously there's the issue of what's going on in India and the fact that for such a populous country, for a country that is nuclear armed, shares a border with a Muslim majority country next door. I have been reading stories about what's going on there with Modi's government and this Hindu nationalist movement for a couple of years, and it just keeps building and building, and there's not a lot of chat about it, not a lot of chat at all, and now we have a link here with New Zealand, and it is growing, and we keep on talking about whether Seymour's being a useless idiot. Maybe he was just like, I'll do a piece to camera. You just tell me what to say. Just
to pick something up. Useful. I mean, useless idiot, I think is still accurate, but we say useful idiot. Useless works for me, but I think it's 1984, isn't it? It's 1984, useful idiot.
Yeah.
Useless works. I'm just saying.
I mean, he has a responsibility. Like if you were in his position and somebody says, just say this phrase to camera. Would you not go, yeah, sure? What does it mean though? Let me
but
just
even
do
that,
a quick Google on that one.
But you do, yeah. Even that, it doesn't. It's a prayer. I talked about it last night. It means Lord something something. It's not even the words translated into English don't necessarily mean anything. But as the professor was saying, it's all about context. Like I was saying in the clip that's on YouTube. I'm sorry, that's on Twitter that I haven't played. You know, the USA, the context of that. We don't need to be told that these guys are right-wing Trump supporters because that chant has been co-opted by them. So we have the context. So even the words by themselves from the translation of that, they don't look neither here nor there. So he'd have to then go one step further and know the context. Because I agree with you. I'm thinking like, you know, if you know, because we're big celebrities now, Chewy, you know, we've got like 10 people watching us now. If someone stood beside us and wanted to take a photo and they were wearing a t-shirt with some slogan on it and we didn't know what it was, would you go, hey, can you just explain this to me in its entirety before I stand beside you because I don't know what it means? You wouldn't. So that's why I'm saying I'm prepared to give him the grace and say he was a useful idiot, but that doesn't mean now he just goes, no, whatever. There is a step beyond that going, I didn't know. To those Muslim Indians in New Zealand, I'm really sorry if it offended you. And I need to listen more. But he won't. But that's what he needs to do.
Yeah. I mean, on the grander scale of things, here's another country with a religious-based nationalist movement, and if we could just all calm the farm on that, I think we can all agree that it's a bad fucking idea. Yeah. That whenever like nationalist movements on a whole, not great, but you put religion behind it as well, and you definitely have the ingredients for some horrible, nasty shit. As was mentioned, they've had lynchings.
Well, but also think about how this relates to America. Fascist, you know, authoritarian leader, a theocracy. I mean, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene actually says, no, God should come before state. Yeah. Like in the full interview, if people watch it, 25 minutes, I do talk a bit about the whole Christian parallel. You know, because he said in the interview that Hinduism's not a monolith. There's lots of different kind of sects and beliefs and all the way through it. And it's the same as Christianity, you know. There's liberal ones, there's middle of the road, there's conservative ones, there's the Trumpian ones. And actually what he's talking about in India with this group sounds very much like MAGA, but with a different religion. Very much like it.
It's almost like there's been enough time gone by from World War II that the lessons there have been forgotten somewhat, and everybody's like, well, you know, maybe my border with my neighbor isn't as locked in stone as it has been for the last 60 years. Maybe people have forgotten that concentration camps are a bad idea. Maybe we'll just do some really nasty shit. And I think when you look at the news, so much of the news these days, these recent years, and you wonder what it was like in the run-up to World War II. I think you're seeing it live. Like, it's everything that happened in World War II was reported before it became a big issue. You know, there were rumblings at the border. Jewish people aren't getting treated so good in Germany anymore.
Literal terminology,
refugees.
like calling them vermin, using that kind of dehumanizing language. Literally what Trump is doing at the moment. Literally from his songbook, from the Hitler songbook.
And that's what it, as someone that has read a lot of history and that sort of thing, you know, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So you know, it's a bad time. It's a bad time, and yeah, there are no solutions. Well, there are solutions, but I don't think our little podcast has the weight to solve these problems. But I'd love to.
I don't know about
myself
that.
in these.
I don't
Tell
know
Modi
about
to fucking calm the farm and tell Netanyahu that if you inspire someone to go and assassinate your main political rival, maybe you don't get to be the prime minister after that.
Well, and think about that. You got the Argentinian election. You've got what's happening in India. You've got Trump. You've got what's happening in Ukraine. There's lots of, you know, it's a dangerous time. It's an interesting time, but also a dangerous time. And I tell you what, look, not to sort of kind of clutch at too many pearls here, but we need to see and hear what's happening overseas, and then think about what are the words and stuff we're hearing from our politicians.
We're not
here.
Immune to it.
No.
You look at the top flight first world countries that have fascist, authoritarian adjacent political parties and that sort of thing. Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, Germany, France, Italy, England. It just goes on and on. They're always there. The fight doesn't end. So, you know, a lot of the times when you look at this and you extrapolate out to some possible future, you know, people go, oh, calm down, mate. It won't be that bad. It's not that bad until it is. And if you don't point at it and go, well, this is a precursor. We've got some dishonest actors. We've got people stirring the pot. Like, so glad to see the Atlas group mentioned.
Yeah.
Those are some guys that really need a spotlight shone on them at all times. In the same way that you want to turn the lights on, find out where the cockroaches are. They are funding some really devious little campaigns and lobby groups the world over.
Yeah, in New Zealand as well. There's rumours that's happening in New Zealand to some particular people who are putting out content, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we've just got to fight it. And we've, you know, here in New Zealand, it is stuff like standing side by side with Maori when they say, "Hey, look, this isn't the way." It is standing with oppressed people, no matter what their religion is, or you know, like, I mean, for so long we've looked at the Muslim world and gone, well, maybe they're the bad guys. They're the bad guys of 9/11 and you know, all of this sort of stuff. They're getting their asses kicked at the moment.
Yeah.
They're the whipping boy in so many parts of the world.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think if you need to balance the scales, you need to turn to these groups and go, yeah, this is not fair. You know, you here you are in New Zealand. You need to be safe here, no matter who you are. And I think these are the things that we talk about and that our listeners agree with and that sort of thing. And we need to be vocal about the things that make New Zealand. And for me, that's calling out things that are unjust. You know, we're a little country. We've always stuck our finger into bigger arguments and gone, no, that's not right. We've called our allies on bullshit before, and we should continue to do that.
Yep. Now, very good. Hey, listen, we're 60 seconds away from 90 minutes, so we're going to wrap it up now.
I'm back, baby.
I was going to say, you've been storing a bunch of this up for about 4 or 5 weeks, haven't you? I just want to say one of my favorite comments from tonight, Joey, you'll agree with this, I think, from Stay Positive. love these interviews, the people who know topics. That's what we do. We actively aim to be the dumbest person in the room. In fact, what did I hear over the holidays? Someone said it the other way around. If you're always the smartest person in the room, you're in danger. Find another room. If you're always the smartest person in the room.
I like that. Yeah, look, these people that are out there and are so generous with their time with us, they might talk to a mainstream media outlet and that sort of thing. They might get asked for quotes and it gets butchered down and removed from its context and that sort of thing. That was always what we set this up to do, Pat, is to give these guys, it started with COVID and that sort of thing of like, let's get some smart people to explain it all to us. That's the idea.
Yeah. All right, team. Beautiful. Thanks for joining us tonight. Chewy, so good to have you back, brother. I feel whole again. All of a sudden. We will be back tomorrow night. And look, it's Thursday tomorrow night, so let's open up Discord. Maybe you can have a question for Chewy about America or something. Is it really as big as they say it is, Chewy?
It's fucking big.
Yeah.
It's really big.
So we'll be back tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hero News. Thank you for being with us tonight, Whānau. Loved seeing the chat going on in the chat. And we will catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition. Until then, stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow. Remember to bring a friend. Hooroo.
Cheers, folks.